hitting the letter H now. And again. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Matrix Conference. I hope you all have had a great conference so far. This is Dead Day. For those that drink coffee, I hope you've had some because we have a 2-hour session. But we promise to try and make it as exciting and engaging as this topic can be. My name is Andrew Morgan. I am on the Spec Core team, and...
Yeah, I'm Travis. I'm also on the Spec Core team. I'm also Director of Standards Development for Matrix.org. So hopefully everybody knows who we are at this point. I don't recognize, all right, there's no unfamiliar faces, which is good.
Yeah, and today we're going to talk about the Matrix spec process. And actually show you how to write an MSC and what goes into reviewing an MSC. So, who has an idea for an MSC that they would like us to write today?
Yeah, we were going to try and actually write an MSC and get it published, so...
we need your help.
Yeah.
If there is something in Matrix that you want changed, an idea that you've wanted to happen, that takes roughly 10 to 20 minutes to write a simple proposal for. Ideally something that hasn't already put out there, so we're not just putting up the same MSC.
I don't know if it's been put out there, but copy a code. Like when you get an SMS, you can copy the code directly.
A number even better.
Yeah, a number or a...
Like semantically saying that this is a two-factor auth code, and therefore it should get auto-completed into... Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, just so you can copy it from the...
Yeah.
Okay, so we would somehow want to hint to clients that, hey, there's some important information.
Yeah.
You should present, like, copy this text to the clipboard of the user when they hit a button.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. You want to roll with that?
Sure, yeah. That's how it sounds, like a 10 to 20 minute MSC.
And not a straightforward one. You know, there's possible ways that you could do this. We need to try and figure out what the best one is. Yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
Alternatives. Yes.
And issues, potentially.
All right, so I'm going to play the role of the MSC writer. You know, I've had this idea, something really close to my heart. You know, I love Matrix, but just if it could just have this feature, then my life would be complete. And Travis is going to play everybody else.
Yeah.
All right, so how do we actually write an MSC? How do we get started? I've never done this before. You know, maybe I'm not even a programmer. You know, I just like Matrix. Well, a Matrix spec change, for those that don't know, but I think most people do, but we're going to explain it, is a document, a markdown document, and it is a technical document, but it is also one that is at least initially easily approachable by anybody. You know, we want this to be clear to developers so that they actually know what we mean, but at the same time, you want to be able to give it to someone and they can say, oh yeah, okay, that sounds like a good idea. I'll have, you know, my team look at it. Maybe we can look at implementing that for you. So there's a balance to strike, but it's not too difficult, and we'll walk you through it. You want to make sure that you don't get too fluffy with your writing, and by that I just mean don't write a novel. But at the same time, just consider the whole ecosystem. You know, don't just write down a couple sentences and cause it good. Right. So, grab your favorite editor. Mine is, well, okay, it works. VS Code. And start a new document. Right. What we want to do is start from a known good place. We have a proposal template in the Matrix Spec Proposals repo. If you are not familiar, we have a repo where this happens. And it is on GitHub. And you know, GitHub, it's not the perfect place to do this process, but it is familiar enough to most people. And on the README of the repo, we have a sort of a text overview of how you can get started, but let's just skip past all that and dive right into it. Under the proposals folder, we have this proposal template. Now, Travis wrote this a few years ago, and it's essentially like its own sort of fake proposal, and it kind of tries to be very meta about it. But we're just going to start with the section headers. So, what do we start with? Oh, it's not even in the introduction.
Well, yeah, the introduction's after the title. So first we start with obviously like a title, like what are we calling this? So we are working with our two-factor authentication, I guess identifying hints, and so...
Yeah, but maybe, do we want to make this generic enough that you're just hinting to the client you can copy anything? Doesn't strictly have to be two-factor authentication.
Sure, yeah, that would be a good starting place.
The title's always the
copy
hard part.
paste hints.
Copy, paste, hints.
Well,
It's a
we'll
working title, you know,
Yeah.
we can go back to this one.
Yeah, like the title may change just like a lot of the rest of the MSC as well. Like you're not stuck with it. Yeah.
Now the other bit of important information about an MSC is that it has an identifier. An MSC, when you refer to it, it's typically MSC 1000. Oh God,
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, I was trying to avoid that, but yeah. An MSC has an ID. The ID number gets assigned to you when you actually publish your PR on GitHub. GitHub will reserve an ID for you, and then you refer to your MSC by the ID from there on out. But we haven't done that yet, so most people typically just start with 0000. That looks like a great title. Moving on.
Yeah, so now we have to introduce our problem. So in the problem statement, we try to make it as clear as possible, like what the thing is that we're trying to solve. And so with the language, we want to ideally, if we can, have some information that other people can follow. They don't necessarily have to have a technical background. They should be able to understand that this MSC is the thing that they want. The rest of the proposal might be highly technical and not make sense to them, but that's all right. But yeah, once we have this problem statement established, then we also talk very briefly about what the solution is that the MSC will be covering.
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind this is half technical writing, half politics, right? You want to get people excited about your change. Why should they care? All right. Well, a lot of people have this pride. I know you do. Okay. So, in Matrix today. It can be used for communication. One thing that is communicated. Beautiful.
Very
I'm so
self-conscious.
proud of this. Is two-factor authentication codes. In other platforms, I love to compare to other platforms. One convenience is being able to quickly copy-paste two-factor auth codes. This is not possible in Matrix today.
New paragraph.
All right, so we've established our problem statement. We've related to our audience. And now we want to say what the solution is. Okay, when sending a message, my message could contain a hint to the user's client that they should copy some particular part of the message.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
Alright, sounding good so far. It seems relatable, easy enough to read.
Yeah, I mean, I have some ideas on the implementation.
Yeah, so, well, now I've got to actually think, oh gosh, well, this idea is great, but what's the solution going to look like? Now, you do have to have some understanding of Matrix to actually write a proposal. You have to actually present a solution. So, what could we potentially do here? We have this whole spec that already exists. and we need to change it somehow, and hopefully load it somehow.
Yeah. How's that Wi-Fi looking?
Yeah, let me just build the spec offline. So
Yeah.
all right. Well, in Matrix, one thing I do know is we have these messages, and that's what I'm sending around. So I guess I need to include my information in here. Does the audience have any ideas of how we could actually implement this MSC?
I mean, it might help if you can view source on a message. What does a message look like? Like what sorts of things could we add here based off of what we already see for a copy paste code?
Yeah. So this is what my client is receiving already. Obviously we have the text. My client could try to read this and use some fancy AI model to figure it out, but we want our clients to be easy to implement. Okay, so what could we do? Do we have any ideas?
Yeah, so you could add a field somewhere in there, perhaps in the content or maybe elsewhere, but that just says like, copy paste code or something, and then includes whatever the relevant, 6 digits or whatever it is.
Yeah. Okay. So I've copy pasted this JSON blob here, and I've taken it into my code editor to play around with it. All right. So the suggestion was to add a field. We can stick this anywhere, and just for now.
Under content, please.
Already getting
Thank you.
ASCT review.
Yes. So we should put it under content. Now, obviously, you can start here and we can iterate, but that's a great first suggestion. So we're going to stick it under content, mostly because the stuff that is top level is more metadata about the event, and it is stuff that is shared between a lot of different event types. But this is kind of only going to be relevant to an m.room.message event type. So let's keep m.room.message specific stuff under content.
One of the biggest things that one has to understand is that when you are sending a message, you are actually sending the content payload. You are not sending anything else. So room ID, transaction ID doesn't really matter, not relevant here. And this blob, the JSON object that is sent as a content, all other fields, you are not producing them on the client side.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
You might be deliberately trying to make them book.
Our audience is too smart.
well, if we end up in a situation when the home server will generate all that stuff that needs to be copied, then that's not bad.
Okay. Does anyone have a suggestion for a name of this field?
Copy hint.
Yeah, could do that. Underscore or dash?
Or camel case.
Fighting words.
I like underscores, but yeah.
Maybe
I don't know how
hint,
you guys do it.
maybe hint dot
You choose.
copy or something, because then we can have other hints.
Whoa, that's a very interesting suggestion.
Yeah, we're getting into alternatives already.
We could even have hint sub dictionary.
I sense over engineering here.
All right, we're gonna start with copy hint because that was the original suggestion. Okay, and let's try and think of an example. I mean, maybe this isn't the best example. How about your 2FA code? Wait, hold on. Just incrementing code. Okay, and our copy hint for this would obviously be that. All right, yeah, that seems good. So how would we summarize this in our introduction? We're not going to paste this whole JSON blob in our introduction. We just kind of want to intro it.
Do we want it in our intro? Or do we want it as the dedicated proposal section?
When it comes time to explaining your actual solution, that's going to go in the proposal section. This is just going to be rough summary if you're reading TWIM and you don't really care, but you just kind of want to know what this MSC means. Just read the intro. Shouldn't be anything but a short overview. So my solution, I propose to add a new field to m.room.message events that will hint to clients what text they could allow the user to copy.
Yes.
Is that about allowing or actually facilitating copying?
Enabling.
Can I ask a meta question?
Yeah, of
Are
course.
we trying to review as we go here, or is this a deliberately slightly wobbly initial MSC that Travis is then going to review? Because we seem to be mixing it up a bit between trying to get
Well,
it right first time.
Somebody can't even nudge that.
So there's multiple rounds of review with different parties when it comes to writing an MSC. When you're initially writing it, it might just be yourself, it might be your team, but it's probably a small group of people, and you will have some feedback in that stage. But moving past that, once you actually have a draft, there's another round of feedback, which is getting feedback from the wider community. Now, obviously, we have a large team here, so there's going to be a lot of iteration. But yes, feel free to shout out suggestions. I think that keeps it more engaging. I'm sure we will find problems along the way regardless. But yes, hopefully we leave some till the end. All right, great intro. I'm really somewhat proud of this.
I am bothered by the lack of
New
line
lines.
limit.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But
My editor will do that later.
yeah, all right.
Okay, so the next section in our template, I want to actually follow along with the template, is the proposal section.
Oh yes.
What happens in the proposal section, Travis?
So the proposal section is your proposal, if the title wasn't clear enough. But this is where you actually get into the technical detail of what your solution is. This should be descriptive of what you want to see. It shouldn't be like I propose or I think or like anything like that. It should be very assertive. This really helps sort of clarify that the solution that you are proposing is what Matrix is doing or should be doing. And once we convert that MSC to spec, very much later in the process, it's already pretty much there. You already have the specification. You're effectively writing the spec, but you don't have to be as formal.
Yeah, I think that's a little subtle to describe, but it's instead of saying I want to add this field to m.room.message, it would instead be like m.room.message
Yep.
contains a new field,
Yes.
whatever we named it, copy hint. And yeah, you're speaking as if this has happened, and yeah, we just use that style of writing.
Yeah. It's also important to note that your proposal, particularly at this stage, like we just started this document. It does not have to be a complete idea. Bullet points, exactly like this, totally okay. Incomplete ideas, also okay.
I'm gonna get rid of the bullet points though. I was just writing down what you were saying.
I suppose. But yeah, like you can have you don't have to complete the idea at this point. You can just simply jot down what you already wanted or what you want to see, and sort of your beginnings of the thoughts. And
Yeah,
then-
this is a draft after all.
Yeah, and
Okay.
like we might publish it, or like you might publish it in that state, and flag it as a draft, flag it as a work in progress, just to help people understand that they might be reviewing something that isn't a full and total idea yet.
What? Yeah.
Yeah. So
So I actually think this was kind of a good starting point here.
yeah.
So m.room.message contains a new field, copy hint, under content. Okay. When we say this is a technical document, technical writing means you need to be very specific and try to leave out as much ambiguity as possible. If you imagine that somebody is coming here to actually write code, this is what they're working off of. So you need to be as specific as possible. You can't be overly specific. Okay, well you can't, but it's hard. So we would like to say m.room.message contains a new field, copy hint under the existing, yeah, thank you, content field, content dictionary. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we've got that far. This new field will contain a string
Sure.
containing, oh dear,
Oh, yeah.
representing.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah, using
Got
all
my
the words.
thesaurus right here. Text that the client could offer the user. Wait, no. Will offer the user. No.
Whoa.
May offer the user.
May.
Mm.
Yeah.
Ooh, capitals.
Oh,
Yeah.
now we're getting into
As is-
keywords.
As referenced in RFC, blah, 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 blah.
We have a question.
Yeah, should it use RFC language? Keywords.
Yeah.
It can help. If you are familiar with the RFC keyword language, then it definitely can assist in the technical writing side, because yeah, you are writing pseudo specification, and so particularly in the later stages of your MSC, it is helpful, and the spec core team might look for that sort of stuff. But in the very early stages, you might just say it's represented to the client for copying, and then as you iterate, as you figure out what those requirements and those product requirements are, you might alter them to say more like, okay, yeah, it's a should, it's a must, it's a may, it's a could, that sort of stuff. But like maybe here, instead of RFC language, we might consider saying containing a string that the client could present to the user.
Yeah, all right, that sounds good. Let's not get too much into the weeds. So, present to the user to copy.
Yeah.
Examples. Examples are so useful. Too many MSCs just don't have them. But also make sure your examples don't get out of sync with the MSC. Because as a developer, this is clear. This sometimes could be up for interpretation. This actually shows what, I can take this and put it in a unit test. I probably shouldn't, but I could. An example is below. And then I could say new field, just for the developers that can't read.
Yes. It's also worth noting that in particular the GitHub flavored markdown is a bit weird. So when you use just the JSON code block, it's fine in VS Code, but it turns everything bright red in the GitHub editor. So use JSON 5 or JSON C, and it'll fix itself.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh. I like 5 better.
Yeah. 5 has comments. Not 5 doesn't.
All right. Is there anything else we add to the proposal section? I feel like we've kind of covered
Yeah, I mean,
the extent of this one.
in terms of like a draft, like this is a fully formed proposal. There are other sections that we might want to template out, just so we understand that like we have to fill them out as we go. So if I was your team member reviewing your MSC, I might suggest like, oh, we should add the other sections. We might not fill them out just yet, but we should at least add them so we have ideas of what other things need to be included as we progress through this draft.
I see so many holes in this already. Okay, what's the next section?
I believe the next section is alternatives. Nope, I was wrong. Potential issues. It's potentially an issue that I don't remember the template. But yeah, so for now, totally okay to say like, yeah,
I think this is fine. I don't.
yeah, this is great. Ship it like just straight off to production. There's no concerns here.
Alternatives is the next section. Maybe there's multiple ways that we could do this.
Yeah, I mean like one of the suggestions earlier was to have a hint.copy or an object or that sort of
That's
stuff.
true.
And so we can
Okay. You
like,
can have
yeah.
a hints dictionary.
Yeah.
A Boolean for copy hint, so the whole field, the whole content is copyable.
Ooh. I like that alternative.
Wait, what? It's just you copy the message entirely?
Yeah, so if you set copy hint to a boolean instead of a string,
Yeah.
then the whole message is presented to the user to copy.
I can always just copy a whole message.
It's not exactly convenient. You probably don't want to copy all that leading text.
But
Yeah.
this is why we would put it into the alternatives, because
But
the
it doesn't
alternatives.
fix my solution, which is I just want to copy a part of a message.
Sure,
The
but
alternative is sort of like the status quo already.
Yeah. I guess the alternative is you're not
Leave
changing
things as is.
Yeah.
Don't do
The
this.
alternative almost every time is what if we don't change anything at all?
Right.
Yeah,
But
true.
also they can be bad alternatives. The point is to pose the question so that when somebody else reads it and think, well, hang on, why don't we just do it all on the whole thing? Then you can read the alternatives and find out why we didn't do that. Otherwise, you just end up with another comment, for people's sake.
Yeah.
It can also strengthen your proposal, because ideally, or what you are trying to do here with your proposal is you are proposing something, which means you also are trying to convince people that this is the idea that we should follow. And so sometimes if you have an idea that is an alternative but doesn't quite make sense for the scope of the MSC, you might put it in there and make sure that it's just well documented, so people look at it and go, yes.
Another question?
Maybe instead of storing a string, store the index inside of your body.
Yeah. That was.
I was waiting for that one.
Okay.
Surely we should use a data attribute on a span within the HTML.
Ooh.
Right. So
Now we're getting many alternatives.
So that suggestion is, perhaps you have a start index, which would be 1, 2, 3, 23, and then 29 or something. So a start and end index, right? And the advantage of that would be, if my bank is really secure, then it actually helps cut down on the bandwidth of the message, because then this would just.
And
I don't know
now
what bank you're using.
And now we're in for off by 1 error.
Is that inclusive or exclusive?
Yeah. So use indexes in the message, but one issue here is that it's harder to implement.
Yep.
But you do potentially use less bandwidth, but sometimes more, depending on how secure your bank is.
Or insecure your bank is.
Okay, I feel like we've considered the landscape.
Yeah.
I have one more.
Sure.
Okay.
You could maybe it's a bad idea, but it's still an alternative. Use it as a metadata, because some messages might be encrypted, and then you want to send that unencrypted. Obviously, I'm saying it's a bad idea, maybe, but it's still an alternative to be considered.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, so if the event is encrypted, leave the 2FA code out. It's been considered. All right. All right. We really should consider the rest of these, but I think we can probably stop here.
Yeah, the next section is really helpful for that last point there. So security considerations, where we start to consider what have we done wrong that may cause some problems. What also have we done correctly that is potentially helpful. So at this stage, so at this stage we might not have security considerations, but as we build out more of the design, we should be documenting what things we've considered. Like, are we considering that plain text two-factor authentication codes are okay in encrypted messages? Why did we consider that's okay, for example? That sort of stuff. So we would include this potentially later in a stage. It does not have to be, documented right now.
All right. This is a draft.
Yeah.
My team thinks this is excellent. We're really excited to get this out to the wider world.
Yeah.
What do I do now, Travis?
Well, I think you have to hit save.
Okay. All right. Let's.
So it'll be.
Okay. Copy his.
There we go. So usually your file name is just the MSC number or the ID, and basically either a dash copy of your title or something that at least shorthand describes what your MSC is. So we are working on copy hints here, which is a shorter version of copy paste hints. you can also predict the ID, or you can just wait until GitHub gives it to you and then go back and edit it and just add another commit. Try to avoid rebasing. I'm gonna keep stalling for time as Andrew.
Oh, I was
figures
supposed to be
out how
doing things. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
after you. Yeah.
Let's change to a new branch and do copy his and grab my YubiKey.
So yeah, as you are trying to publish this, you have a couple options of just opening the MSC with the quadruple zeros across the entire thing, which is what a lot of people do. Some people try to guess what the ID will be just by looking at the previously opened ones, because GitHub always adds one to the previous issue or PR. Make sure you look at closed issues and PRs if you do that.
I do.
Yeah, it also helps if you commit your work. The Git process, there are a lot of guides online if you're looking for that sort of stuff. GitHub in particular has quite a bit of content around this.
All right.
So once we get it committed and pushed,
And the page opens.
yeah, so then you end up with this PR script or this PR thing.
Oh my god! Wow, this is getting serious.
Yeah, and so what's happening here is you need to actually add a little bit of metadata because, for one, make sure that your file's actually there. That can happen.
Looking great.
Proud
of this.
It's a lot of green.
What do I put in the description?
So you have to add a rendered link to the actual.
The hexa rendered link.
Yeah. So since Markdown files have two representations, you have your plain text version with all the asterisks and everything else. Then you also have your actual Markdown that has been previewed. And so usually you can get that from your branch.
I'm just gonna look at somebody else's who's done this before.
Yeah, exactly. So you can look at somebody else's. Extensible Profiles as Room sounds great, assuming the Wi-Fi is doing the thing. Yeah, and so if you take a peek at what this Matthew Hodgson has done here, you can see that it is just a regular Markdown link that just says rendered.
Yeah, the point of this is so that people can quickly
The
be
link is outdated.
on this particular one.
Yeah, on this particular one.
Great.
It's okay, I won't.
It leads to the old matrix dot repository, which is no more.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, like if you either copy paste somebody else's or view the file in a browser and then just copy it, although you have to change the blob.
Trying to change this. Yeah. Remember all the Git instructions. GitHub will tell you how to do that.
Yeah. So that'll be your branch name typically.
If you have any questions, you can find us on Matrix.
Yeah. So there's the matrix spec room. There's also we'll just cover the matrix spec room for now. And now you have a decision to make of creating pull request or creating draft.
I've made the decision.
Great. It is a draft because it is not a thing, and it looks like you have an MSC number now. I believe
Ooh.
it is 4197.
Wow.
So then you have to update all of your metadata because you have chosen not to predict it. And so yeah, you just go back through all your files, make sure you rename the file as well.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And also at this point, try to avoid try to avoid rebasing your branches. We squash commit everything at the end when we get to that level of the process, so don't worry about it. Just add as many commits as you need, or as many as you don't need, whichever you prefer, and that will help with making sure that basically there's linear history, doesn't mess with the GitHub UI, that sort of stuff.
Trying to avoid using my aliases so it's not so cryptic.
So after I say don't force push.
Oh. I would always force push.
All right. Typically, if there's been no review or you've only opened it 3 seconds ago, then you might force push.
I also didn't change this, but
Yeah, you might also
who's counting?
you might also have to update your title and your rendered link if you've already done that. And then so what the spec core team will do is behind the scenes we will add some labels to just make it clear that like this is a thing that needs some sort of discussion. So we might add a few metadata labels, but for now we mark it as a proposal, and we also said that it needs implementation, because part of the MSC process is actually implementing this MSC. That doesn't have to be you that does it. Can be somebody else, and the hope is that as part of implementation, you get some better ideas on how to sort of iterate on this. And it's a great thing that we just didn't fix
the wrong solution in. Yeah, it's great.
But that's also why it's a draft, is so that way you can iterate on this. And so at this stage, interested people that have seen the MSC get opened, it's broadcasted to all of the rooms, might go, what is copy hints? And they might leave some comments.
Well, okay, so how do I get my idea out there, right? Because I've written this, but no one, except half the spec core team, is actually looking at these. So I wanna advertise it. I wanna get developers hyped up. Where do I go?
Yeah, so we have the Matrix Spec Room, which is a great place to actually get review on your MSC.
Are just dangerous.
Yes, live demos are great. So you want Matrix Spec for now. And look, the bot has posted your MSC.
Oh.
So sometimes this is enough where people will see that and go, great, I'm going to click on some links. But you can also sort of add a little bit more commentary as well, and just say like, hey, I really believe in this MSC. I don't think there's any problems with it. I don't think that there's anything that we need to discuss more. How can I help folks implement it? Because the implementation does not have to be the MSC author. You can just throw ideas out and then hope that somebody is interested in implementing it. But if you have an existing sort of client or server or whatever, you might also be interested in implementing it yourselves. Emojis can also really help, just as a communication hint.
Great. All right.
Yeah.
I can't wait for someone to actually read this.
It looks like people are already excited.
I love the Matrix community. All right.
And so, now we start getting some review. So if we take a look at the actual sort of files changed here, this is where most people are going to leave comments. If you're reviewing an MSC, it's very important that you add line comments, which is...
Travis, would you like to be the community in this scenario?
I can try.
All right, go ahead.
So like if I'm leaving comments on this, so somebody from the spec core team has helpfully already... Yeah, the community, this quotient guy has already left a comment, very helpfully. And so we prefer that things are left as line comments using the plus sign on the left-hand side there, or if you have something that sort of is broad across the entire file, there is a comment on this file button at the top here, so you can just leave something there underneath the title itself. This is helpful because now we have threads. We can actually discuss all sorts of details of, the author could, for example, say, I don't believe you. I did, in response to Alexi's comment here, but obviously we want to have this be a productive and very forward-moving conversation of just like, in this case, it's like, whoops, yep, I didn't see that. So would the author like to reply?
Now remember, the Matrix community is you. Like anybody at this point could come along and review this MSC. It doesn't have to be people that are always in the spec room or have some sort of status. Anyone can come onto GitHub here and leave feedback. And the more eyes on each proposal, the better. So yeah, all right. I've got. This is tough. Got some feedback. Oops.
Yeah.
Let me go fix it.
Yep.
All right, so what I meant to write, this is so embarrassing, was this, fix the example. I like to do it in this way around.
Yeah, sure.
Push
Yeah.
that up, grab
So many YubiKeys.
grab this and let's say, fixed in.
Yeah. GitHub will convert that to a link for you as well. So you add a single comment, and once you've resolved the concern, just hit the resolve conversation button, then the thread will disappear. looks like GitHub wants you to refresh. There we go.
There's another comment from.
Oh no, we're just getting like drip-fed review here, but like
This is what it's about. This is the iteration process. Should we extend the scope and also consider redacting the content after copying?
ooh. So now we're getting into questions, and so as the community here, I don't know, how do we feel about this? Because sometimes the MSC author might not be the first one replying to a thread. And there, might be somebody opening this thread saying like, hey, we should consider removing and redacting this content. And other people might have ideas on whether or not that is within scope of this MSC. So, is this within scope of this MSC?
No.
So,
Because you're already have MSC for destructive messages, even if it's not implemented. And this isn't anything to do with copy pasting. This is like, once you read the message and do something with it, please delete it. And we don't want to edit it because that won't actually, it will give a false sense of security if we literally just hide to evade things. So it needs to be a full redaction. We already have the redaction mechanisms there, at least in the spec. Maybe. At which point somebody will contradict me to say that the secure messages stuff doesn't actually give the semantics for delete after copy-paste interaction from the copy-pasted MSC. It only defines delete after reading.
Those are all great reasons of which I wrote down too.
But that could be another MSC, no?
Yeah, so that would probably be, honestly, if you're role-playing this route, this is almost certainly how it would go. And then if you write that's a brilliant idea, let's not feature creep it anymore, it's a new, feel free to open a new MSC for that.
yeah. And then, there are issues with the current proposal as it's been designed. There was the discussion earlier on whether or not, or saying that the client should auto-copy to the clipboard. That may or may not be within scope of this, but the MSC doesn't clarify whether or not the client is allowed to automatically copy. So is this a thing that potentially off of the sort of community review here, maybe after implementation, maybe somebody went out and wrote a PR for Element,
Do you want to be the developer?
I can try to be the developer with my many hats.
All right.
And so I could say that like, hey, you know what? I wrote an implementation.
Oh wow, that's great. How did you go?
So it's currently a draft PR in Element because I have a concern.
Yeah. Okay. What's wrong? What's wrong?
I have this concern where the two-factor, like I really like the two-factor authentication code being in the event. That's
That was
really,
my
really
idea.
helpful.
Yeah, I did that.
I really like that it's your idea, definitely not somebody from this audience here. And so, but what I'm concerned about is whether or not it should auto-copy or auto-fill. If I have my banking app open.
Think about that.
Yeah, if I have my banking app open, I mean, like Google Messages does this. When you receive the text message, it grants permission and just dumps the code for me. Is that something that Matrix can do?
Well, actually, I really think that's up to the implementation, and the spec should define that.
Okay. I accept your opinion.
But perhaps what I could offer you is another field that hints to the client whether this should be auto-copied.
Ooh. I like the idea of more fields.
Yeah. But I actually don't. So I'm going to put it in the alternatives section.
I like it in the alternative, but can we get something maybe in the proposal section that clarifies that the client is allowed to do this?
Okay, yeah, no, that's fair. That's an ambiguity. You didn't know whether you could or you couldn't. I should explicitly say that you could. So this conversation might happen on Matrix or somewhere, and you could go ahead and put the conclusions in a new PR comment, but I'm just going to put them straight in the doc because that's where they should end up eventually. Because even if we have the conversation here publicly, it will eventually get collapsed, and then Bravis will come along and have the same question, and I don't want to rehash that conversation. So Yeah, what I could say is just somewhere in the proposal, just to be clarifying, clients may,
Ooh.
I love RFCs,
Yeah.
may automatically copy the field, the contents of copy hint to the clipboard without asking the user first.
So the other thing is, going back into the role playing for a second, my PR has been reviewed by the Element team, and they are uncertain about whether or not I should be using what is clearly a stable field. So how do I make sure that, if they want to land this, how do I, make sure that like we're not about to cause conflicts with the spec? Like they have these concerns about this unstable prefix. What?
Okay, yeah.
So can
Alright,
I
yeah.
get that from this MSC author?
So this requires some context. If a client wants to come along and implement this field, they can do so, but they will now be creating events with this field, and those events cannot be changed after the fact. If I then update this MSC to something like that, they have to go ahead and rewrite their implementation. This is an unstable field. So in the spec process, if an MSC is still live, hasn't been accepted yet, we don't want to have clients go ahead and send fields that are effectively unstable into rooms. The way that we handle this is we say, please use unstable prefixes to prefix your field, whatever it might be. And you can do that while the MSC has not been accepted. You can send these out into the wild. The main issue is if I write copy hint here, and people start using it, and then maybe this MSC doesn't work out. And then another MSC comes along and they say, I think we should use copy hint. And then that gets accepted. Well, all these old events that were using my implementation that was a string, and it turns out the other MSC that actually uses indexes is better, you're going to get conflicts. So to prevent this, we have a concept called unstable prefixes, and those are defined in your MSC in the section I ignored earlier, titled unstable prefix. So developers come to me and they say, what is the unstable prefix for this field? I want to send these events out into the wild. What should I write? I can't write copy hint. So you, as the MSC author, it's your job to define this field. So the typical nomenclature for this is to write org.matrix.msc4197 and then the rest of your field. So copy hint, copy hints, copy hint. And the way you would actually write this is you would say, while this MSC is not part of the spec,
Or not considered stable.
all instances of the field name copy hint should be replaced. Be replaced with blah 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 copy hint.
It's not just the case of the MSC being unstable. There's one more situation where actually unstable prefixes really help. If I come up with another MSC that competes with this one, and I happen to use the same field, then the two MSCs, in terms of the actual payloads, become indistinguishable, causing a lot of pain to people who are trying to do early implementations of that.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned. So you might have another MSC that tries to do the same thing but in a different way. If they're using this, who wouldn't use this? This is brilliant. They might end up conflicting. Now, I think this is enough to make an implementation.
Yeah, so now that, like I've already written my implementation and
Yeah.
the element team came back and said, hey, what's your unstable prefix? So I very much appreciate
Yeah,
the
no.
unstable prefix that you've added.
No worries. I'll
That's
commit
definitely
that
not going
for
to
you.
take 2 minutes to commit with a YubiKey.
You get used to it after time. Oh, it is taking a long time. Oh, this is so embarrassing. Oh gosh. It's the Wi-Fi, I swear. Gosh.
Or security.
Well, while that's loading, all right. So you've written your implementation.
Yeah.
It seems to work.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's still a PR, it's still kind of landing, but that's okay, I think. Users are showing great interest in the PR. People are running it on their like development accounts.
That's so exciting. I'm so
Yeah.
glad that this is officially getting out there, and
Yeah.
banks are starting to use it before the MSC is stable.
Exactly, yeah. So now that banks are, for once, well in advance of the curve, and actually implementing this, I think it would be good to get that needs implementation label off of this.
Yeah. How do I tell the spec core team to get rid of this blight on my MSC?
Well, yeah, so you have a couple options. If the spec core team has already come by and left the implementation requirements comment, then great. Just add it to there, it'll be fine. Otherwise, yeah, you can just add it to the description here. So if you just
Yeah, so we
edit-
want this to
yeah.
be prominent because MSCs can get hundreds of comments after a while, as you've seen, and we don't want this, I have implemented it, yada yada, to be 60 comments down. So it's really best for the MSC author or the spec core team who can go ahead and edit your comment to stick an implementations list right at the top in the PR description. So I'm going to follow Patrick Cloak's design where it says server, but actually there doesn't need to be a server implementation. So.
No, yeah, there's no server required here. And so it's just purely client side.
Sorry,
so
Patrick. Okay. So I'm going to link to the Element Web PR that you've written.
that I've definitely written, yeah.
I'm
that's-
so active on this repo.
Yeah, that's definitely here. It helps that you're looking at closed PRs too.
Yeah, I'm glad that was the first
uh,
selection.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh, look at that, an MSC implementation for a different MSC.
Element Web. There we go. So yeah, it's fine if it's in a PR. It doesn't have to be merged as long as people can actually go and build it and try the code out, and it seems to work. And the spec core team has agreed that that looks like a good implementation and it works in practice. Then yeah, someone's implemented it and we've passed that part of the spec process.
Yeah.
I just implemented it, I'm just pushing it.
Yep. All right. Now, not every MSC needs an implementation. Obviously, some things are so minute or obvious that it's not necessary. Some things it doesn't really make sense because it's not a technical change. You can come up with examples. Sometimes it does affect both clients and server, and you need multiple implementations of each of those. Sometimes you might not be satisfied with just one implementation, and this is a really big change, and we want to make sure that Roomba won't explode. So we want it to be implemented multiple times just to really make sure and let it sit for a while. So it's the final say goes to the spec core team, and we will communicate with you whether or not your list of implementations seems sufficient. But just know that it's not a hard and fast rule, and it just has to be one. It's on a case-by-case basis.
What's important too is like while this implementation is happening or multiple implementations are happening, you still have that community review. So there may be multiple different types of issues within the MSC still. Like implementation does not mean automatic acceptance, but there is some iterative process to be had here. I suspect Matthew's implementation will be on the React SDK.
This is put 83 on the React SDK. Although I also screwed up the push. But
Probably on the Element HQ.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh.
yeah, I went HQ.
Look at that.
So
Wow.
look at the bottom.
You gotta sign the CLA, Matthew. Beautiful. Oh, and you even got the prefix. I love it. All right. Cool. I'll link to this. And you know, I've had some community feedback. I think my MSc looks great. I
Yeah.
think it's time now that I ask the spec core team to review it, because the next stage of the process is actually getting a spec core team member to have a look at it. That's too many words. And kicking off a proposal for final comment period.
Oh no, you want final comment period?
I do.
All
I'm
right.
that sort of guy.
So at this stage, you would make sure that you have your MSc out of draft status. So
Yeah, please don't forget that, otherwise we'll go,
yeah,
it's not ready.
yeah. So just click the very helpful "Ready for Review" button.
Looks so beautiful and so
And
proud.
yeah, it looks like the spec core team already saw the implementation being added and has removed the needs implementation label. And so now everything is all set to actually start this sort of final stage. And so what the author can do, or somebody who just happens to be reading the MSc can do, is just copy the link right into the Office of the Spec Core Team room. So if you want to advertise your MSc there and just say like, hey, I think it's truly inspiring. So if you just say like something like, hey, I think that this is ready to go. This should be merged to the spec. It has the implementation. I've run out of comments to resolve. I've filled out every section I possibly could. We are fast forwarding a little bit in this process because obviously our MSc has some gaps. But at this stage, an SCT member will take a look at it, and they might propose a final comment period. So if there is a spec core team member in the room that may like to propose this for FCP.
Yeah, and obviously we're not going to go through the whole thing on this one, so I guess we could go and find some example MSc, like this one that Travis did a while ago, so we can just show you what the comments from the MSc bot look like.
Yeah, so it looks good. I don't see any reason to delay, so I'm proposing for FCP merge.
Thank you, Talir. So Talir's gone ahead and written this comment, and when he's done that, he's activated the MSc bot, and the bot is just a bot on GitHub, which will ping all of the other members of the SCT to come and review this and check off their box. Now, there is a process too for the spec core team here. They're not just going to read this blind and try to keep all of that in their head. To make sure that we don't actually miss anything, we have something called the MSc checklist. And this is public. It's just a document in the root of the repo, and each SCT member should have this with them while they are reviewing your MSc and just making sure that everything is good before they check their box. Now, obviously, as the PR, the MSc author, you can also use this checklist and check it yourself, ideally before you ask the SCT to look at it. And we could just go through this now with our MSc.
Yeah, so do we have an appropriate implementation, I believe was the first one.
Yeah, we've got that.
Yeah, sounds great.
Looked appropriate.
Yeah, the spec core team looked at the implementation, or somebody looked at the implementation and went, yes, that matches the MSc. It's not doing anything terribly exciting or different compared to the MSc. So yeah, it's very much appropriate. I imagine the link goes to something that describes that in more detail. I'm hoping so, at least.
I'm sure it does.
Yeah.
All right, let's get through this quickly.
Yeah.
Are all MSCs that this MSc depends on already accepted? Well, I don't depend on anyone. I am my own man. For each new endpoint that is, I haven't introduced any endpoints, so that's fine. We can skip all that. Will the MSc require a new room version? No, I don't know what that is.
No.
Are backwards compatibility concerns appropriately addressed?
Ooh.
Didn't even think about that.
Yeah,
What
how
is-
do you copy things without a hint?
So backwards compatibility is a big topic because, in Matrix we try to remain backwards compatible with older Matrix clients and older Matrix servers. It takes time for people to update, even if the client gets released, users take a while. So we have to consider if an old client that doesn't support this field receives this field in a message, what's going to happen? Well, should be fine. JSON, you're allowed to have extra fields.
Yeah.
Hopefully, when certain clients receive this, they don't explode when they see an extra field. They should just take the fields they want. So I don't think there's any backwards compatibility concerns. If I was really nice, I would actually write that in the MSC so that people don't, ask me about it over and over again. But I think for this MSC, it's kind of implied.
Yeah.
Okay, our endpoint, sorry, that should be under the endpoint section. If an introduction exists and clearly outlines the problem being solved. Yes, we
Ooh.
really hammered that home.
Yeah, and ideally the first paragraph should be understandable by a non-technical audience. So,
Well, I'm non-technical and I wrote it.
yeah, so in Matrix today, I think this introduction qualifies. And so yeah, like there's not a terrible amount of review that we need to do here.
Yeah, it's
it
fine.
seems like it's already been addressed. The author has a weird amount of experience writing these things.
Yeah.
So,
All right, so I think it's fine. Yeah, I totally did that.
yeah.
Okay, now FCP has been proposed,
Yeah.
and the SCT have gotten around to actually looking at my MSC. Oh, there's so many tabs. I think it was this one. Yeah. And they've all gone ahead and checked it off.
Except for two. Why not those two?
I really
Andrew?
I really don't know what you're talking about, Travis. So we require 75% of the spec core team to check off an FCP proposal to start that FCP. Final comment period, it can either be a merge, which means your MSC will be merged. The disposition could also be close. For instance, if an MSC just doesn't really make sense and the spec core team, for whatever reason, doesn't think it should be in the spec, maybe it should be an off-spec thing or it's enterprisey and no one else is going to use this, we could nominate it for FCP close instead, and then everyone will go and vote on that. And then there's also postpone, which is, yeah, this seems like a good idea, but probably not right now. And we use that quite sparingly. Yeah. But
It's also a bit confusing for what it is.
Yeah. But everyone's agreed that this should be merged. That's really exciting. And now final comment period begins.
Yeah, and there might be review from the spec core team in between. I believe if you scroll up just a touch, there is obviously there is feedback from there is feedback from the spec core team on this example MSC of just like, hey, it's not quite ready to go yet. Like there's just something. Sometimes this will get raised as a formal concern that'll block FCP from starting. That needs to be addressed, one way or another before the MSC can progress forwards. But in this case, it looks like Rich just said like, hey, here's some suggestions. Check the box. Off we go.
He's even provided the solution, which is really kind of him.
Yeah, which is really helpful. And so then, assuming that's addressed and everybody else is okay with it, FCP now starts.
Okay, so this is your last chance to say anything. If you really don't think that copy-paste hints should be in the spec, you have 5 days to raise a concern. And typically people don't. Typically the document has been pretty cleaned up at this point. But you do get 5 days. And if those 5 days pass without a peep, then the action is completed, which in this case is merge. So the document gets merged.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, now
Put
it's
that on my
accepted.
CV.
Yeah, now it's accepted into the spec. And so from this point, it's basically just somebody, doesn't have to be the author, writes a spec PR to actually add the MSC to the formal specification.
Question.
During FCP, do concerns from anybody stop the FCP, or is it only concerns from the spec core team?
So it's concerns from the spec core team that'll actually formally block it, but it is on the spec core team to monitor for community concerns like that and raise them as appropriate. So if there are either one or several community members who are saying like, hey, why is the field a string? It should be indexes. Like this is like fundamental to my understanding of copy hints.
Mm-hmm.
then we might add a concern to just say like, hey, we're just gonna slow this process down a bit, or we might even cancel FCP if necessary. But the spec core team will look for those comments and raise them on behalf of the community. I believe that's mostly a process function of the bot, because we've stolen it from the Rust community.
I rewrote it, thank you very much.
Sorry.
And then haven't committed to it in 3 years.
All right. It's a well-maintained bot.
But obviously things can get a bit controversial at this point, right?
Yeah.
Because there might be an implementation, you know, the Element web team might have said, we're gonna release this in the next version, you know, it's really exciting. And if something comes up here, then you have to delay all of that. And at that point, it's really the job of the spec core team to be those impartial moderators and say, look, no, actually, this concern does make sense. We do need to stop the train here and go back. So that's why we have so many stopping points and places of feedback, so that we can try to weed that out before this point. But really, this is really the final bit here. Now, obviously, concerns could happen afterwards. After the MSC is accepted. In that case, typically what we want to do is have another MSC which corrects the previous one. But that's just the process.
But yeah, so after it's accepted, which means awkwardly it gets merged into the spec proposals repo, somebody will write a spec PR for it. That can be the author, doesn't have to be, much like the implementation. The author doesn't have to do much other than actually write the MSC. And so once we actually have the spec PR, the spec core team will review it. That's a very lightweight process, requires one review, and then eventually it ends up merged.
Well, so hold on, like I've got my markdown document, and that's all well and good. But I hope this loads this time. But the spec is not marked, like it's different. There's a whole lot of text here. Am I supposed to change this somehow?
I mean, like you can through the matrix spec repository that you were auto-completing a second ago.
This repository, this is actually where the spec
That's what the
proper
spec
is built. Okay,
yes.
so this is separate from the proposals repository.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay. This has more codey stuff. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
There's HTML test.yaml.
Yeah. So your proposal has been accepted. That's great. Hopefully it was clear enough that now somebody can come along and actually update the spec text according to your proposal. Now, that doesn't have to be you that does this. Typically, the spec core team will take on this task, but it can be anybody, and we really like it when it's not us. So, if you would like, you can so there will be a label that says spec PR needed.
Spec PR missing.
Spec PR missed. There it is.
Yeah.
So you can take a look at this label. Oh my gosh, we are so good at our job.
Well, usually they're merged, so they are on the closed tab.
Oh, yeah, no, okay.
Yeah. So there's some options there.
So anyone can come along and convert these proposals into PRs against the matrix spec repo. And then the spec core team will be the ones to actually review those. And once that gets merged, then you just need to wait for a release of the matrix spec, which is every quarter of a year, so every 3 months roughly. And then it will actually appear live on this website. That's exciting. But, okay, so you were the Element Web Dev. When do you actually get rid of that ugly unstable prefix thing and start sending real fields out into the wild?
Yeah, as soon as your MSC is accepted, so as immediately after that FCP finishes with no concerns, that is when you can actually switch all of your implementations to the stable stuff. And this will depend, like how you approach this depends on your particular project. Like if you are a developer, you might consider a sort of fallback or grace period where both are supported for say 6 months. Or you might just say, you know what, my users haven't really been sending this a whole lot, so we're just going to ditch the unstable stuff, it's never going to work again, and we'll just use the stable identifier. But critically, it is important that within about 6 months of the, I believe, spec release, that all implementations migrate or start to migrate away from that unstable prefix.
Yeah, we'll start poking you if you're still sending unstable prefixes in the latest version of your app because new clients won't actually understand the unstable prefix, right? Because they'll start getting the actual field in there and they'll start forgetting about the unstable prefix and your events won't work.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's important that we poke the ecosystem to move forward.
Yeah. Immediately after FCP, you can start switching over to the stable stuff. Sometimes, depending on the feature, you might also have what's called an unstable stable identifier. Those are in relatively complex MSCs. The spec core team will help guide you through writing that section of the proposal, and also there are some example MSCs throughout the repository that actually show what that is. And so it's just for largely feature detection to make sure that, you know, if you are doing something a little bit strange between spec release and FCP, that things kind of work out well.
Okay, I think that explains the process, but one thing I think we all wanted to do was to really rip into this MSC.
Yes.
Maybe we'll head back to the rendered view here.
I think
so
there
what
were
are
already some comments too.
Yes, there were. So obviously, you know, we've gone through the process, but let's pretend we're back at the community review stage. Yeah, that's a perfect one to start with. So I just said copy hint, but typically what we want to do when we have fields in matrix is to put a prefix in front of them. And obviously the unstable prefix was one of them, but when you have a field that's actually merged into the spec and it is part of the spec, the canonical prefix to put in front is m dot. This shows that this field is part of the matrix spec and it's not some enterprise somewhere doing it. M is reserved for official matrix.org field. So yeah, that seems like a good idea.
Yeah, I think that is, with my spec core team hat in this performance, I think that would be definitely a thing.
But Travis, some fields don't have an m dot. Why is that?
Legacy reasons.
Yeah.
So yeah, like not everything will end up with m dot, but as we sort of explore more and more features in Matrix, we tend to add more and more of these namespaces. So as Matthew has kindly noted in the MSC here, like we should namespace this. M.mentions is new. M.mentions also has an m dot, and so yeah, we should make sure that our new field is equally sort of part of that as well.
All right, here's another one. This should probably not be limited to m.room.message. It's effectively an extensible event mix-in to provide an alternative presentation of the message specifically for proposing copy-pasting. Right, okay, well that's interesting, right? Because m.room.message, that's for users sending messages to each other, but we also have bots in Matrix, and typically they don't use m.room.message. What do they use?
Well, and so Matthew has mentioned the extensible events stuff here, where there's a mix-ins thing. Yeah, and so this might, yeah.
I was going to avoid diving into
Good
that
luck.
because
Don't open the Pandora box.
that is a legitimate suggestion. Extensible events is how we want to rework the event structure in the future, but it's going to be some time before that gets there. But
It's
yes.
compatible with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but this is the MSC we just did is compatible with it.
Yeah, that's true actually. Yeah, which is something we could say in the MSC. We could say when it comes time for extensible events, this could be implemented as X.
Yeah.
Right now, without it, I want to get it going today. It could be implemented in the way we showed.
Yeah, and extensible events, has a dedicated sort of mix-in system, which is basically just to say this block of this block of sort of content within the JSON is actually supported, and you can just do that.
Where are the examples in this MSC?
Well,
Oh,
so,
there they are.
yeah,
That's a
the best example for a mix-in might be the notice extensible events MSC, which is right there.
That was what I was trying to query
Yeah.
you to say
so-
earlier. So we have m.room.message with message type m.notice. That's how it works, right?
Yeah, so like currently, like we have mroom message, which is a little overloaded, and we have a message type as part of that. And so that message type is m.notice or m.text or m.emote or something similar to that. Good luck.
Here it is. It's easy. I love navigating stuff.
Yeah, it's not 36 pages printed, but yeah. So like currently we use that, and that's how we communicate bot messages. But when we start to get into extensible events, where any event could be represented in a number of different ways, like how do we communicate that this is an automated message? And we might want to expand that to further things as well. And so that's what MSC, whatever it was, does. So 3955, I guess, is it adds a mix in that is just m.automated true. And so now bots in this extensible event system could emote some automated things and that sort of stuff. And so we would be looking to apply a similar concept to the copy hits.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's great. I could expand that in the future.
Yeah.
What I was getting at was, we might have different event types that we might want to stick this
Yes.
on. But actually, m.notice is a message type.
Yes.
So
but
our
in-
proposal would work.
But in
for this.
extensible events, m.notice is not
Yes.
an event type.
I would need to think about that. Okay.
Yeah, but
Good
let's say you want to
suggestion,
copy
good
something
suggestion.
from a poll. Or something.
Oh, a poll.
Yeah.
That is another place we can put user-generated text.
Yes.
That's true.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a good idea. It's not in the spec.
It's not in the spec.
It's accepted, but it's not in the spec.
Yeah. Someone needs to get on and write that spec here.
It's dependent on acceptable events.
Where is my MSC? I have so many tabs now. Oh, this is my other. That's my other window. Okay. Yes, that makes sense. Maybe m.room.message is not the only thing. I should also include it in m.poll.
Well, but if we do it as a mix-in, we could just say any event type, which is what Matthew is proposing.
That would be so much easier. That would
Exactly.
be so. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Let's pretend I wrote that.
Yeah.
One thing. Okay, maybe. Might want to mention we're deliberately only letting you hint that a single thing is copyable, given you can only put one thing on a pasteboard.
Yeah, this might be a
That's
potential
true.
issue.
That's true. What if I have 3-factor authentication, and I send 2 of those factors in the same text message?
Yeah.
I need to copy them both.
Also, what if your clipboard supports HTML?
Both of these are terrible ideas, and I don't think we should enable it. So yeah, we could say that. We did consider.
Well, this might be an issue more than an alternative.
Yeah,
I guess it could be both.
No, it's alternative.
Okay.
All right.
Well, Matthew says so.
Project lead says yes.
We only allowing multiple. Let's say
Copy hints.
type of copy hint. Copy hints is an array with multiple suggested values to copy.
I think Android already does something of the sort.
It does let you. Yeah, it will show you
When
too.
you have like an address, then it lets you copy the address sometimes, or copy the number, and then these will
Yeah.
pop up as a few options.
That's true. Copy house, like copy just the street name, copy just the postcode.
Yeah, it does that. Something weird with clipboard.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It copies everything, but then.
That's from the notification, it copies everything, but on the clipboard it gives you.
Yeah, then you have the option to paste different.
Yeah.
Ah, that's pasting, right, you're right, yeah. It copies everything, pastes everything.
That's a great topic for a future MSC that builds on top of this.
But doesn't it fit to this? It's a copy hint, right?
Yeah, it would.
It's just not 2-factor authentication.
Well, but you could also argue that it is hinting where the interesting part for the clipboard is. This is where I put on my spec core team hat
True.
and
yeah.
defend the MSC. And so yeah, like the MSC might be saying like, hey, it's a hint of an area that you should consider copying, and then something like Android might actually look at it and go, I want the whole thing, or like this is the whole address, and it'll split it apart of just like, oh yeah, that's clearly an address. You know, the postcode is here, the street name's here, that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
So at least when you go to paste, it gives you the multiple options. But it's just saying, like, in this message, this is the interesting bit for the user to consider.
But could we take this as inspiration to perhaps include a collection of hints here instead of only one?
Yeah, so that was the idea. It's like maybe this could be an array instead, and you could put multiple things in this array if you think if you want the client to present a choice of what to copy to the user. That could make sense. We might want to limit how many choices there are.
Yeah, potentially. That would require, product review, which like a client through implementation might go, oh yeah, our users don't actually need to copy more than one thing, or like, hey, yeah, they need to copy 10 things all at once,
Yeah.
and I'm really sorry about your clipboard.
And that is a really unfortunate thing to mention right at the end of the spec process, because it's such a good idea that we should turn this into an array that I think we would block it and
So we'll stop our imaginary FCP and consider this in more detail.
But Travis and Andrew, what we actually do here is we've got two different companies going and contributing to this MSC. One of them says we should allow at least 10 different copyable things, each with a different taxonomy of postcodes, which don't exist in all countries, as well as different streets and towns and things. The other says that my product team doesn't want to allow more than one thing because it would be too complicated. It will confuse the user and it will look like Android, and we hate Android because we're in iOS. iOS only lets you copy one thing. In fact, it puts it in the OS to let you hook into it. And there aren't any blah 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 blah. So how do we resolve two competing different product teams? I can go get it.
Well, we need to consider that there are a lot of different users and use cases in the ecosystem and try to come up with a solution that satisfies both of them. You know, something we could do is we could say, you know, maybe there should be one field that is just a single string, and if that's present, then clients may want to prefer that. We could say it's an array, but put the most important thing as the first indexed item, and clients that want to keep it simple just always take that and ignore the rest. The other client could be happy presenting all 500. Any other ways we could skin the cat?
Yeah, I mean, like, this is highlighting the sort of process step where the spec core team might sort of disappear for a little while and debate it, because there are multiple sort of opportunities here. Much like what Andrew said, might come up in that discussion.
It'd be really nice to have multiple implementations that do each as well, that we could play with, and we could see whether or not you know, one of them actually makes sense to put in the spec. But yes, generally we try to support as many use cases as possible without going crazy, and keep solutions generic so that matrix is as extensible and useful as possible. So I'd probably lean on the side of keeping it an array. You know, it's not many extra bytes, and it enables future solutions to use this field for other things, perhaps.
Because the point here is that we don't necessarily try to be forbidding specific things. We're trying to be enabling.
Yeah, even if I disagree with only showing one field.
Yeah, we are trying to provide some common, like for the cases like this, we are trying to provide a common denominator, or a range having a common denominator that would enable both product teams to do what they want to do.
Yeah, and this feedback from product teams is really useful. You know, the spec core team is only 10 people, right? And we're largely based in Western Europe and the United States. You know, we don't know about
Close enough.
North America. You know, right to left languages, that's a thing that we typically don't deal with. There's a lot of stuff that is just, we're completely blind to.
About Asian digits into codes.
Yeah,
Those
exactly.
2 byte things.
You know, if we said this field can only contain Roman characters and numbers, then actually we'd be leaving out a lot of potential use cases. So the feedback cycle and getting this in front of as many people as possible is really important, and we have to be open to all feedback that we receive.
If I can ask another question, acting very much as a random community member, so totally role-playing here, something you can say, but hang on a second, Andrew and Travis, you both work for Element. Surely you're just going to prioritise Element here, and if Element's product team said they only want one thing to copy, you're going to ignore everybody else. What do you say to that?
So yeah, like obviously a lot of the spec core team does work for Element, but we do make sure that like those sort of responsibilities for the Element team don't translate. Sorry, Wi-Fi. Don't actually sort of interfere with our responsibilities as a spec core team. We are required to balance the overall ecosystem over any individual player, and so that does mean balancing the spec over Element, or even our employers in many cases. And so there is that, but also there are independent and neutral from Element representatives on the spec core team, namely Alexi, Tuller, Patrick, and I have to remember it every once in a while. Sorry?
Yeah, I think
No, I think there's 4.
Yeah.
No, alright.
You might be counting yourself as independent because you're completely seconded to the foundation.
Yeah, I guess, I count myself in many cases. I'm 100%
Okay,
of,
yeah.
yeah, so I'm wearing the community shirt, alright?
Yeah, basically, in response to that kind of shout from the community, somebody like me was coming in and saying, nope, I'm going to demand the full motion, I'm totally happy with this thing.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
even though we only require 75% of people to agree, any spec core team member can raise a concern and that completely blocks it. And they, mostly because the bot doesn't support it, but they have to be the one to eliminate that concern themselves. But yeah.
And now we're in the situation where actually independent members collectively can block the main proposal.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we have the blocking minority to it.
But this is something to consider, and whether we're doing it on purpose or not, we use Element every day.
Yeah.
So we might only be thinking about use cases that make sense for those suite of clients, which is why community feedback is so important. We do have to be the ones that take that in and make sure that we do, and people like Kitsune need to keep us in check, but there are a lot of things we just won't think about. And the reason this is an open process is so that we can get as many voices into it as possible. And it's all public, and if we're being cranks, that's on the open internet, and you can shout at us about it.
If I can just chip in one thing, answering my own question to some extent on how you resolve a product conflict which doesn't have an obvious answer. We have a weakness in the spec core team that there isn't a product. Deliberately the spec core team doesn't have a product because it doesn't represent any particular company or vendor or client or server. And so if you do have a fundamental impedance mismatch, I think on this one we could probably manage it. You could recommend which of the codes gets presented if you only can copy one, whilst also supporting the other use case. But it could be totally incompatible. Like, are you allowed to retrospectively change threads? Would be a good one perhaps. And some people might violently think it's a bad idea to be able to change a thread structure in retrospect. Other people might demand it. And all this sort of fragmentation. And frankly, I'm not sure we have a good answer of what happens. We could try to make it cool, but we're spec engineers rather than product folks. We don't have like a designer on spec core team, we don't have a product manager or UX interface designers or researchers or whatever. So it's a bit of a grey area right now. Luckily we haven't hit it that much, but it's something that we're quite aware of as being a gap in the process.
Yeah, and we might reach out to other product organizations.
Yeah, I think the way you did it perhaps is to almost poll everybody else on the product side and hope it doesn't end up 50-50.
Yeah, and this might also be something for the governing board, which Josh is definitely listening to. Where it's like maybe that is a function that the foundation needs a little bit more strength in is more understanding of the sort of product area of the specification.
Well, just a process to reach out to other
Yeah.
folks rather than trying to turn us into a product team which then starts competing with the community.
I guess, yeah.
Affairs.
Well, not building it out, but like building out the sort of a capability for for that to happen. But like that would be a governing board discussion, I guess, of like how to implement that.
But surely in practice what happens is when someone tries to implement it into a product, either at the spec level you blocked it and then someone will say, what the hell guys, and then you fix the MSC,
Yep.
or you left it too open and then the product person will just take whatever they need to make their product look
Yep.
what they got. So yeah, you could add the product input at the foundation level, but
Yep.
at the moment where the product is starting to implement something, they will also by themselves fix it.
But if it's
Yeah.
too broad, you're going to get fragmentation, and suddenly it won't be coherent across matrix. If literally some people
Yeah.
are using your 9th and 10th copyable code for really important information, the iOS guys don't even get shown it at all, and then it all starts to fall apart.
Okay.
Hi. Maybe something adjacent to something you asked yesterday during the Meet the W More session. That was, do we think that the foundation should have a, what do you call it, engineering?
I was saying, should the foundation write code?
Yeah.
So,
And so my question, adjacent to these, bringing these two questions together, is how do you deal with, well, sometimes you as the spec core team, or from the foundation, you might have an interest in bringing something forward that is not driven by somebody's engineering team, product team, something. So I imagine usually things are about features that, I don't know, my client might have, like copyable stuff. But I don't know, maybe you notice, well, we should really have authenticated media. And then how do you drive that, and especially drive the implementations when from the spec core team side or the foundation side there isn't implementations?
So yeah, from like the foundation perspective, if there's something that we really believe in, we might, go around and say like, hey, can somebody implement this? Because the spec core team is not responsible for implementation. We do not write code outside of the spec to write code to render code. And so, and in a lot of these cases, and this was what my talk yesterday was also about, was like how do you actually get those implementations to happen? So what you can do, particularly for a rollout of say something like authenticated media, is just go around and start implementations. If you are that sort of development team that is trying to push this feature into the spec, or you can simply just advocate for your MSC within those developer communities. That's
Implementations do need to happen, right?
Yeah.
And obviously companies that want the spec to be written and implemented and merged for their client or server or what have you, they will put up money to do it and pay developers to do it. But if they're not interested, then it can be tricky, and maybe it would be really nice for the foundation, and if they had the funds to, have some full-time developers to go and implement MSCs that seem like they are the best thing for the spec in the community.
I have a couple of considerations here. One is that if even given that each of us, or most of us, are like on the one hand we are spec core team which is not supposed to do implementations. On the one hand, pretty much everybody of us is still an active developer who is doing something with their other hand. So implementations are in this regard they're sort of happening by virtue of the same person writing the specification and writing implementation at the same time. That's convenient to a point, but if we try to make it more isolated way, like SCT writing an implementation in a concerted way, then that becomes awfully resembling the design by committee situation.
Because yes,
where
if you,
we can, with our academical kind of hats, figure out something very nicely laid out, implement that, and then it hangs out in the air without actual use because we made it, but somehow the original question is very suspicious. How does it come that nobody wants to implement something yet SCT wants?
Yeah, so sometimes, yeah, like the feature is
Weird situation.
complex. Yeah.
Complex feature, yes.
Yeah.
We can try to guide people,
Yeah.
maybe. But if we take on and implement that,
Yeah.
then actually the second piece that I'm concerned about is that, okay, we've done that work, we've implemented the thing, but the life cycle of software does not end at that.
Of course.
It has to be maintained. It has to be supported.
Yeah.
And if we write that, are we supposed to take it on support? Are we supposed to maintain it further down the road? It's not exactly the function of SCT.
Yeah, so this wouldn't, if the foundation had a team of engineers, they could implement it in Element or some client out there.
Or multiple clients.
Yeah, but then, they have to convince that team to maintain this new feature, and maybe it will be rejected on that front.
Yeah.
And the foundation could have its own client. That'd be cool, but that would be even more expensive.
You've probably got two different classes of project. You've got projects that are bounded within the foundation, that the foundation really wants and needs and can give the authority on, like, say, trust and safety, do you know what I mean? Like that, like the foundation can talk about overwriting of that product to an exit point. They would look after maintenance of it,
Right.
because that would be the natural way to do it. Then also when you're talking about implementing in other people's systems and products, that tends to be less common. Normally it's the other way around. People have a need and so they do their thing and then they go through this whole process. And I think that's what you were going for there. Like why would people not want to implement it?
Yeah.
The case that we're weak on right now is the authenticated media case where the timing and coordination is really sensitive. It wasn't necessarily a lot of work in every single project.
Right.
It's not trivial, but it wasn't like a huge thing. But getting all the ducks in a line, even within Element, where we were sort of very coherent on wanting to get this done, like that was hard. And doing that across the whole ecosystem is doubly hard. So I think we've got to separate out this case of products and projects that the foundation owns end to end, and then also when the foundation might want to provide that activation energy to achieve everything happening at the same time. And if everything's happening at the same time, then I do think it's reasonable to say to that project, as long as you agree this is a good thing, we'll do it, but you have to be the ones to maintain this afterwards. These excellent reasons, and that's a collaboration with them. And if they don't want it, well, they're going to fall behind the spec, and that's a different matter.
But then again, it's more about the technical management kind of stuff, more than actual implementation as it should be. Because either way, the authenticated media is actually a very simple example, because the problem has been hanging in the air for quite a bit of time, and actually the community has already come with quite a few workarounds here and there. People who are doing proxy servers, people who are doing authenticating clients, and so on and so forth. So partially the community has been already ready. The problem has been with the public federation. It's an operations question. It's not a software development question. That's where the technical management piece comes into play, where the foundation definitely has to play the primary role. The driver should be there. Then the actual, keystrokes for the code, they still have to trickle through the community.
I think there are two different problems here that I think Ken was originally touching on. Technical coordination for a complicated thing like authentication, even if other people are around the code. And then completely separately, I think you were alluding to what I was saying about product input, and I do wonder whether we just need to change the process where there is almost a specified product sponsor or almost a new section of the template that says product considerations.
Yeah.
And people have gone and implemented this and designed it and thought it through, and it is based on their product thinking. Or Element strongly think it should only have one thing you can copy, and this is why, and they're basically the sponsor for the product thinking that has gone into it. So it's not just almost the code implementation that that says, hey, we've got a whole bunch of different implementations from different people, but it's almost also we are proving this will work because somebody on the UX and the overall coherency side of things has also had a think through, which we just don't have. An implementation could be good enough for somebody to do it in, on a Nintendo 3DS in the most unusable way imaginable. And right now we would say, oh yeah, it's awesome, let's merge it.
Like
that's how we fix the gap.
implementations are also effectively votes of confidence towards the MSC. If an MSC has a single implementation that's a 3DS, that's not necessarily a massive vote of confidence towards it, but if there's 6 or 7 clients that have said just like, yeah, I implemented this, it took me 5 minutes sitting at a conference.
That doesn't mean it was a good thing to do.
Sure, yeah.
Because if we said, oh yeah, we should allow people to do 25 different copyable things, and here's our taxonomy, for a bunch of random gigs who don't quite always get the user sort of perspective on this. And sure enough, 8 clients could go and implement that. We might then just go plonk it straight into the spec, and meanwhile some poor product manager at Beeper or whichever your favourite matrix vendor is could be rocking back and forth saying, what has the spec team done, going and putting this totally unusable, unergonomic thing. This is why Corey says the matrix is unusable and crap.
But the flip side of that is that if I'm just an individual contributor and I don't have the ability to pay anyone and no one really cares about my feature, how do I convince someone like
I
Eleanor?
suspect the team needs to nominate somebody, just like we might ask somebody for an implementation. Say, look, that's a great idea, but you can't write code. Anybody on the Element Web team or whoever wants to go and do a quick demonstration of this. And likewise, we could say, that's a very opinionated thing that you think that we should hard code every single text message to Magenta. I think we might need a sort of sponsor to validate that from the usability perspective. Hey, Beaver, do you want to own this as, to run it for your people? And if they say, yeah, well, we put this through design review and we think this is probably not a good thing to hard code into Matrix, then it's no longer us as a spec core team playing a product amateur app.
One local company would disagree. The Magenta company.
Well, that is true. No offense to anybody from Telecom.
I mean, something that people have said is missing is just client considerations in general. It's like, okay, a client developer comes along and wants to implement this. What are some suggestions for implementing it? Obviously the original author is using some client and has some vision, but they've then distilled it down to something really, really basic. What was their original vision? And as a client developer, how should I start to think about this? And even if it's not thought about by a proper product person, I think just putting that information from an amateur in the MSC communicates quite a lot more than just the base technical. And even the introduction, as beautiful as this one is, doesn't really have any suggestions for how this should look like at the end of the day. Also talking to getting an enterprise implementation that could work, and I think someone should do it, but of course it won't represent all the use cases out there. So we still need feedback from as wide an audience as possible. And I do caution requiring it because it will be a big blocker, but perhaps just requiring some thought about the end user would be a baseline, and then from there, case by case, we could say, well, this is a big change, I'm not qualified to look at this. Maybe as part of the process, we ask that you go ahead and try and get this actually in a client and into users' hands and get feedback before we merge this.
I guess also a question from the outside perspective, looking in as a community member, are there like rigid guidelines as far as what is considered in scope within the matrix spec versus the spec will cover these things versus you want to color everything magenta, that's not considered?
There are some guidelines of what the values of matrix are, and so then we use that to infer requirements. So we don't have like a strict like you can do this, you can't do this. We have more, it's actually right there, the principles.
Oh yes.
So it's just like, yeah, like we have some obvious like principles of like we need to empower the end user, it needs to be fully decentralized, you can't do things that might necessarily conflict with those ideas. And then I believe further down is, so like these are the things that Matrix provides, and then somewhere else is the actual like pragmatism over dogmatism, like that sort of, like those sorts of values.
What you're looking for is matrix.org/event, I think.
I thought we had them in the spec as well.
I don't think we updated the spec when we actually wrote it down.
Well, there is one thing that is not really spelled out quite clearly, I believe, although I think the spec text mentions that the specification necessarily does not deal with pure UX stuff most of the time. When we have the specific thingy in a particular client that will just show up on the screen in a certain fashion, but it's just a matter of representation of something that's otherwise looking exactly the same as before, then probably we will scope that out because we don't want to be too prescriptive.
But the reason we're getting so hung up on this, or at least I am, is that there is a real risk that because we don't prescribe any UX in the spec, which is fine, we then don't actually run through the full experiment of whether you can implement sensible UX on the thing in the spec. And this case study of the do you allow 20 copies or only one copy is such a good example of that, because we could so blindly just say, yeah, of course, make it an array. What's the worst that can happen? And make product people burst into tears.
You know, with exactly this story with the annotations, with the relationships, where we were making something and there was a proposal to make it an array, and we actually there is
we never got to a good thing. I mean, if Nico was here, he'd probably be very upset at the fact that aggregations were never made an array. But if we could have had a mechanism to say, look, we've gone and run this past both Element and Beaker and Nordic and any other vendor, and everybody agrees that this will be an impossible thing to implement, then perhaps we could have resolved it. Anyway, sorry for banging on about it.
No, it's okay.
I have a question to the audience rather than time remaining. What actually was your experience in approaching MSC writing? So, 2 hours has been spent on how to write MSC. Some of you probably were trying to do that already. And the question is, what was the starting point? Where did you stop, if you did?
I think there's a large barrier to entry for just random community member because there's so much. I mean, we're in the 4,000s with MSCs right now. So understanding what's been proposed and what's been debated already. So we're not just presenting another great idea that's most likely been presented already.
Okay.
Now, something, of course, you can do there is come to the Matrix spec room and say, hey, I have this idea. I mean, often that's where you...
Was it already discussed?
Yeah, you do want to start your proposal just with, don't go ahead and write it all in complete isolation. Start asking people for feedback just on a general vague version of your idea, and that can be the first round of review, and someone might say, that already exists, look, it's done.
I'm just actually, as a complete noob about this, but I think I would be interested in getting involved. Just knowing that that room, the matrix spec exists, and that it's okay to go there and say, hey, I have this idea. That is huge. It's a big takeaway, and it goes completely beyond actually knowing how to write a spec. I also relate a lot with this issue of I don't even know if my idea has value, if it makes sense. There are very similar themes. You were showing, for example, there are sections where you say if you're building on something else or dependencies, I mean, I feel that I should learn so much before even being able to understand how this new idea connects with everything else.
Yeah, the spec is huge, and I don't think any one person probably has read it fully front to back and remembers everything.
I have.
A very small amount of people have.
Yeah.
but there are a lot of people who are experts in particular parts. So getting feedback from a wide group, that's important. And yeah, as you say, we try to, I think, put that where we can, whether it's on the website or down here. There's a few different rooms. And, you know, sometimes you might put a message in and nobody responds, and that's just how it is. You can always ask again. But we try to add as many avenues for both feedback from us and the community as possible, and we do it on Matrix, of course. You can also write an issue, not on this repo, but on the Matrix Spec repo, if you want to do asynchronous communication, and just put your idea here and get feedback that way.
I don't know if it's text calling.
Yeah, that's clear.
Text column. Don't know. What?
For accessibility. Cool.
Downloads.
I also would like to understand it.
Maybe so.
I also would like to talk about my experience of like writing huge MSCs because so like 3 years ago I got out the first draft of what is now the next gen of for Matrix. And I think one thing I probably did wrong at the time is that I really just like had the plan in my mind and only talked about what the technical changes would be. And without really talking about the motivation behind it. And I had a really, really bad experience of people basically going on the proposal saying, this is crap. And I like on a personal level, I was really not ready to handle this. And this really led me to like basically work like in a summary, not talk publicly about the whole thing. In view of like the backlash, and because I wanted to actually work on the implementation, because yeah, people can get very angry on proposals, and it feels like they don't take into account that you're actually talking about to another human, like to their work, and yeah, I don't know, it was a pretty shitty experience, like on my side. Nowadays, now that like we've done a lot of work to actually figure out this communication, now it feels very much fine, but it was hard, and I don't know how to fix this.
We are trying to be better at creating a non-toxic environment there and have a much, well, more of a zero tolerance approach, possibly not totally zero tolerance, if people start behaving obnoxiously. But you're right, it's a huge problem. As I said at the beginning, that toxic feedback is one of the worst risks of MSCs. On the plus side, people care. On the other side, they forget to be pleasant human beings. They just don't realise it.
Yeah, like ideally it would have been resolved by a constructive comment saying something on the lines of why is this important, to sort of give the hint towards the MSC needs a rationale, rather than people just saying this sucks. And so yeah, trying to work towards more of a sort of community situation where yeah, we actually understand that generally speaking, somebody probably just forgot to include a section in the MSC, or forgot to include a little bit of text to sort of rationalize or set the stage for the actual idea and helping collaboratively write it, rather than just downvoting it.
Yeah, if you feel that people are being too toxic, you can always reach out to the spec core team privately, and we can help take care of it.
Probably when I wrote the proposal at that time, I was more interested like in the technical aspect of it, and probably what I would have expected is like people interested already in this domain would just like review the technical part of it, not the do we actually want to do it, and because communicating about like do we actually want to do it, that's like probably the hardest part to do, and when you're like early in like technical exploration,
And do you think a section that talks about end user experience and tries to make it relatable for users would help with getting that point across?
Probably, but when I got the first draft out, it would have meant like a lot of work on my side to actually figure that out, figure the end user.
It's a barrier to entry.
Well, you need to can you use it as the opportunity to say, we're deliberately not considering the UI and the product considerations. This is purely from an access token API perspective, and that might have helped damp things down.
Possibly.
So probably for the initial stages of like works like this, it would make sense to literally put a disclaimer on the top of the MSC. So this is only concerning technical details. We're experimenting with stuff. We don't know if that has merit or not.
Yeah.
So please, only technical points.
I guess the point is MSC authors shouldn't have to know that they need to do that before they open the MSC. Ideally, as a sort of overall community, we would be able to just know that that's the case,
Yeah.
and engage appropriately, particularly for new MSC authors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something that we're obviously working towards.
Let's put it in the template.
Yeah.
We-
Sure.
Potentially quite a productive outcome from this.
Yeah.
Well done.
Right, that brings us to noon. That is the end of our talk. I hope you enjoyed that workshop, talk, performance, role play, whatever. But we're gonna break it there, and let's go upstairs and have some lunch.